Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Keenan. I work with HomeSmart PV and Associates. I've been teaching contracts just for our local agents here under our brokerage for a while, as well as with other firms and local associations. I just thought I would share with you guys what I know. I am not a certified contract trainer, but what I do know is just what I would like to share. This is called a contingency for sale of buyer's property. This is if you are working with a buyer and that buyer has to write up an offer on another home, but they need the money out of this home here. And so the buyer is telling the seller, I love your home, but it's contingent on me being able to sell mine so I can get the money to buy yours. Okay. That's what a contingent offer is. So, with that said, we're going to talk about the first six paragraphs. The first six paragraphs is going to be dealing with before the seller gets a backup offer. Paragraph 7 deals with nothing but the backup offer. This here deals with us entering into contract and closing escrow, the status of the buyer's property. If it does enter escrow, if the party cancels, we have to keep the seller very, got to communicate to the seller very openly how this buyer's property is transpiring as the sale gets further and further on into close. So this property here, if the buyer's going to write up an offer, the buyer would write their address here in this line, and you would write up the address of the property that the buyer wishes to purchase. And then this buyer would put the buyer's name down, the seller's name down. In paragraph 1, you've got two options here. It says that they can just be either by checking one box, only entering into contract. It's only contingent on just entering into contract, not on closing it. Or you got the other option, only close of escrow, because it may have already entered into contract. If you just leave this blank, by default, it goes by entering into contract and closing escrow. And if you are in escrow, then you would write down the name of the title company or the escrow company in this case, and then you would write down the number of the escrow as well as the scheduled close of escrow date. And you would also accompany the purchase contract with your offer if your buyer's home is in escrow with the contact information, which is what you would write up here. Okay, contact information meaning title. They'll have all the information on the purchase contract, uh, agent's name that wrote the offer on your buyer's property as well. Okay. If we go down to paragraph 2, it says buyer entering into contract for sale of buyer's property. Buyer shall have 17 days after acceptance to enter into contract. And so if the buyer's property is still not in escrow after 17 days, then the seller can send over a notice of buyer to perform if they elect to do so, or if they want to give them additional time, they can. In paragraph 2B, it says by the earlier of the time specified in 2A, 2A is the 17 days, or within 2 or blank days after buyer entering into contract for the sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver escrow evidence to seller and escrow. And so you can either go, you've got 17 days after acceptance to enter into contract, or you can just kind of option out to, you also got this paragraph 2, by the earlier of the time specified in paragraph 2, days after buyer entering the contract for the sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver escrow evidence then. So if it's not in contract yet, you can deliver all the escrow evidence after it does go into escrow at that time. Paragraph 3 talks about the status of buyer's property. Buyer signed a listing agreement for buyer's property with or shall within 3 days after acceptance sign a listing with. I put down HomeSmart real estate brokerage. So if it's not currently in escrow, then say it's not currently listed, then it will be listed. In paragraph 3B, it says that buyer's property is or will be submitted to the MLS. Then it says property will not be submitted to the MLS. So if it's not going to be submitted to the MLS, they're going to want to check that box right there. As we continue on down to paragraph 3C, it says buyer shall deliver seller evidence of both the listing agreement and, if applicable, the MLS listing within 1 day after acceptance. If buyer's property is already listed with the real estate brokerage, or if not already listed within 1 day. So if it's not listed yet, they have 1 day after the listing is done. Or if it's currently listed, they have 1 day then to deliver that evidence to the seller that the property is currently listed, just might not be on the market yet. Talks about close of escrow of buyer's property. Now we're talking about the buyer that wrote up the offer. And this is the same buyer throughout this paragraph. It's got several buyers. You got a buyer there, buyer's property, and a buyer. So it's the same buyer. I point that out. In the other one, it was really confusing about the buyers. So it's kind of hard to follow which buyer we were referring to. But in this case, they make it very simple. It says close of escrow of buyer's property. If 1A or 1C applies, 1A I guess they're referring about closing escrow. If 1A or 1C applies, buyer has until the following time to close escrow on the sale of buyer's property. The scheduled close of escrow of seller's property. Now, going to close the escrow. They're going to be closing together, or if checked, no later than 5 days prior to the scheduled close of escrow of seller's property. Now, keep in mind, whenever you get a contingent offer, your contingent offer is kind of like a pregnancy. You want to find out because there's like 3 trimesters to an escrow, 3 trimesters to a pregnancy. So it's going to be going, is your home in escrow yet? If you're in escrow, that means you're pregnant. You're getting ready to that means you're expecting. And if you're expecting, then you want to work yourself through the request for repairs. And if you work yourself through the request for repairs, I call that the second trimester. The third trimester is when you got the closing docs and title. You're ready to deliver. So you want to ask yourself, how far along is this contingent buyer? And that's the best kind of way I think I could explain that to you is by a pregnancy. In paragraph 4, it's going to talk about close of escrow of buyer's property. So we discussed that. So I already talked about that. Status of sale is buyer's property. I thought this is important. This means just a very transparent transaction. Buyer agrees to keep seller informed about the status of the transaction for the sale of buyer's property, including any changes, modifications, addenda, amendments to the terms of the accepted offer, or delays or removals of contingencies. So you got to keep the seller updated on how the buyer is working out for your seller and your buyer. And so again, if you're talking about this, you're talking about a buyer comes in to write up an offer. You've got to keep this seller informed about how this buyer is dealing with this listing here. So that's what I mean by a transparent transaction, because this seller here has every right contractually to know how your buyer is doing here with this sale there. Okay. So now as we head on down into paragraph 6, cancellation of buyer's property. If buyer's property is in or enters escrow and either party to that escrow gives the other a notice of cancellation of contract, buyer within 2 days thereafter shall deliver seller written notice of cancellation. And so you got to keep that seller informed about how your buyer is doing here. He's got every right to know. Okay. So I think that concludes what I wanted to talk about. Hope this kind of helps you guys through it. You guys all take care.